Is King Charles a Muslim? But why are we even talking about this? Well, it relates to a controversy surrounding some of the prince's recent actions. To start with, he was seen packing dates for Ramadan.
You are packing dates faster than I can see them.
And by itself, that means absolutely nothing, right? Because King Charles is a public figure and he's just doing public figure stuff, I guess. But next we have the celebration of Iftar at Windsor Castle. And for those who don't know, Iftar is the breaking of the fast at the end of a day of Ramadan. So Muslims during Ramadan, they don't eat during the day and then they feast in the mornings and they feast in the evenings. And that was celebrated at Windsor Castle for the first time ever. Windsor Castle being the home of King Charles, of course. Now, as I say, this is pretty unusual. Windsor Castle, home of the king, first time this has ever happened. But by itself, again, this isn't really that strong evidence, if we're honest. The king, after all, he's a Christian, right? And so what words do you think the king had for Christians on Shrove Tuesday and Ash Wednesday, or Lent in general? Nothing.
And the royal family also took to their Twitter feed, and they have millions of followers to mark the occasion, sending their best wishes to Muslims in the UK, Commonwealth and all around the world.
Which is all very nice and quite right, of course, because there are many Muslims who are in the Commonwealth which the royal family heads. However, what's been said for the Christians?
Zippo.
Because there's been a deafening silence from, well, the royal family, politicians, and many others as Christians mark the beginning of Lent, despite the fact the king is, of course, head of the Church of England.
Yes, it's all rather disappointing. Shall we get the reaction of the former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, Dr. Gavin Ashenden?
It's very odd indeed the king, who's head of the Church of England, should simply be silent. It's an act of discourtesy at one level, but at another level it's hard to understand it as being just discourtesy.
As you heard the former bishop there say, it's quite hard to understand this as just a discourtesy. And I agree. So what other explanation is there, possibly, for the head of the Church of England forgetting Shrove Tuesday, Ash Wednesday and Lent more broadly? And you see, back in 1993, the Grand Mufti of Cyprus claimed to know for a fact that Prince Charles has converted to Islam. He said that it happened in Turkey, and he said that if you really want to know the truth, look at how often the king travels to Turkey, and you will see that your future king is a Muslim. Buckingham Palace, of course, were very quick to deny this, as you might expect. But such a strange thing to say. Why would he say it, right? Now, you could say, of course, that the Grand Mufti was probably just creating a bit of mischief. Fine. And yet, 3 years prior to this claim from the Grand Mufti, Charles delivered a speech at the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford. And I'm going to read you 2 snippets from it because I think you'll find it rather enlightening. Our judgment of Islam has been grossly distorted by taking the extremes to be the norm. For example, people in this country, England, frequently argue that the Sharia law of the Islamic world is cruel, barbaric and unjust. Our newspapers, above all, love to peddle those unthinking prejudices. The truth is, of course, different and always more complex. My own understanding is that extremes like cutting off the hands are actually rarely practiced. The guiding principle and spirit of Islamic law, taken straight from the Quran, should be those of equity and compassion. Okay, and then later in the speech, Islam can teach us a way of understanding and living in the world which Christianity is poorer for having lost. At the heart of Islam is its preservation of an integral view of the universe. Why is Charles making speeches like this in the early 1990s? Islam was barely a speck in the demographics of the UK back then, so I don't think you can really argue that it's all about him being a public figure and things like that. Unless, of course, he knew that this was going to expand in the UK to become 10, 20, 30%. That would be interesting. Now, Charles has actually made a whole bunch of speeches like this over his lifetime. And look, you're welcome to dismiss these as, you know, he's just a public figure, he's trying to unite people, he's trying to understand something about the world. Fine, you go ahead and do that. But don't forget that this guy is meant to be the head of the Church of England, a Christian church. Anyway, we have another speech from 2006, and this time I have some video footage. And again, it's Charles laying huge praise on Islam.
The rights of Muslim women to property and inheritance, and to the conducting of business were rights prescribed by the Quran 1400 years ago. Some of these rights were novel even to my grandmother's generation. Many of the traits on which modern Europe prides itself came to it from Muslim Spain. Diplomacy, free trade, open borders, the techniques of academic research, of anthropology, etiquette, fashion, various types of medicine, hospitals. Islam is part of our past and our present in all fields of human endeavor. It has helped to create modern Europe. It is part of our own
Yes, of course, because basically everything good in Europe, that came from Islam. Women's rights, they've always been at the forefront of the Quran. Okay, Charles, and why does Charles think he's such an expert on Islam anyway? Well, you're probably going to want to take a seat for this. This is going to shock you a little bit. It's because Charles learnt Arabic so that he could study the Quran. Now, think about this. He could have learned Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke. He could have learned Hebrew or ancient Greek or ancient Latin so that he could better understand biblical texts as the head of the Church of England, but he didn't. He learned Arabic. Now, this is as per an article from the Daily Mail in 2013, and before people say, oh, Daily Mail, yes, Daily Mail, but it directly quotes him. It is true. And it is mind-blowing if you ask me. I find this story, I can't believe I didn't hear about it at the time, but I find this really shocking. Anyway, how good exactly do you think Charles's Arabic is? Well, let's take a listen.
Assalamu alaikum. Hayakum maratan ukhra. Fi al-Memlaka al-Mutahida baladkom al-Thani.
Yes, his Arabic clearly sucks, but what did you really expect? He's a guy who took 2 A-levels and only managed to get a B and a C. And I don't want to sound like an academic snob here. I understand that my academic achievements are not the norm. They are in fact very good. But this is King Charles, at the time Prince Charles, a guy who could have had unlimited tutors, the best possible education, everything. And he only managed to get 2 A-levels, which tells me something. He either really hates education, he's very lazy, or he's really rather thick. Now, if he really hates education, why is he spending so long trying to learn Arabic? That must be torture for him, unless he's really deeply committed to the cause. Anyway, that meeting, by the way, that was a meeting with a whole bunch of Qataris, and the Qataris are the same people who walked into his office and dumped 3 million euros in cash on his desk. I'm deadly serious, you can go and look that up for yourself. What do you make of all of this then? Do you find the arguments convincing that Charles could in fact be a Muslim? As for me, I don't really know for sure, but what I do know is this: he is not a Christian.